Would you comment on the implications of Devin Nugent's $250 million defamation lawsuit against Twitter now that he's been granted standing?
Dinesh D'Souza's lawsuit?
No, Devin Nugent's $250 million defamation
okay.
lawsuit. He's been granted standing now by the court.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, this is a tricky area of the law because these are private platforms. On the other hand, you are entitled to force them to live by their own rules. And I think that's probably, and that's one of Saul Alinsky's 10 rules for radicals, is force them to live by their own rules. And if Twitter purports to be a neutral platform, then I think you have the right to enforce it to be a neutral platform. If Twitter is manipulating, and I think that's the gist of his lawsuit, is that they were somehow manipulating things to his detriment, then I think it's going to be tough for him, I do, but maybe there's something there. And that's what's so difficult about the current situation, is that as Tea Party people, we don't want to rely on the government to do things for us. We don't want the government to necessarily regulate these entities. They may make it worse, actually. And we do respect private property rights. But I do also think, though, that Twitter and Facebook, particularly Twitter and Facebook, have become almost like the public square. They really have. I mean, they are now the new public square. There's a lot of law about what malls and other areas that are ostensibly completely private are allowed to do. And I think that I'm always hesitant to get the government involved, but to the extent government intervention is limited to maintaining a neutral platform for companies that claim they're a neutral platform. Right. I mean, if Twitter wants to come out and say, we're a liberal platform, that's fine, but that's not what they say. And so I think that's a tough one. I don't know enough about his lawsuit to say whether I think it has a chance of success, but I think these companies are all facing increasing claims in that regard. But I think it's tough. I think it's tough.
For a long time, there was nothing but liberal media out there, and all of a sudden Fox News kind of appeared. Is there anything like that on social media that might be coming along?
Not that I'm aware of. It really is unique what has happened with social media. There used to be other platforms, but I think because social media by its nature depends on access to large numbers of people, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That the larger the platform, the more effective it is for the purpose of social media. But I know a lot of people who have said they're leaving Facebook. I've noticed some of them come back. Okay, we do have a website. I mean, we do have a page for the website, but I have a personal page, and I don't really post much political content there because I really don't care what other people think, and that's not where I want to argue with people. But I do reconnect with high school friends, and that's been really, really valuable.
Kind of, as a comment on that, one thing I noticed, and this is generational, I've got two children with a bit of age difference. So when my son was... Yeah, let's try the microphone. Let's see if the microphone works. Put it closer now. Hello. I'll just shout. Yeah. I'll just shout. I've got a good voice. So I've got two kids, a little bit of age difference. So when my son, who's the old one, was getting to that age and in school, all the kids were on Facebook. I mean, all the kids. Now my daughter, who's now in high school, hardly any of them. And I talked to some other friends. I'm always curious about this. And it's like Facebook is like for old people. That's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, it's now Snapchat and Instagram, which is owned. Instagram is owned by Facebook. I think you're right. I think that is generational. I mean, I see it even in my kids who were, late 20s, early 30s. They don't really do Facebook anymore. They did when they were teenagers, So I think, I think there can be changes, but they're going to happen organically. They're not going to happen because someone tells people, go to Snapchat, not Facebook. So I think that is a point well taken, but that's a generational sort of move. And like I said, Facebook owns Instagram. I'm not even sure how Snapchat works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this working?
Yes.
Yeah, you're really close. Speaking to your what you were talking about how over-reliance on social media can kind of sink your boat if you do it too much. One of the things that Bill Whittle and his series of online shows did is they turned more towards private donations and investments to help fund their work. And I recently saw Eagle Insurrection created some sort of entity similar. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you for opening that topic up. Yes, the pressures on digital media are intense. Many websites, large media websites, are shuttering, laying off staff. It is the advertising rates are half of what they were 4 years ago. And so it's very intense pressure. So we did form and launch on March 1 the Legal Insurrection Foundation, which is a 501c3, can accept donations, tax deductible. You can donate on the website. There's a big button that says donate. And we considered that something necessary to provide the funding to allow us, one, to continue doing what we're doing, but also a lot of what we're doing now is more investigative and in-depth research, and we're sending people out into the field with video cameras, looking for that viral moment. And someone once described us with a term that I think fits us perfectly. Is she says, well, "I know exactly what you are. You're what we call disruptors." And that's what we do. So we and for the anniversary post, go to the website and read our 11th anniversary post. I said, what we're focused on is building community among the people who agree with us and creating chaos among the people who disagree with us. And so thank you for letting me mention that. So that's what we've seen. So we're not dependent on advertising revenue because that would require a whole lot of steps that we just are not able to do. We have no big media investors. We're not owned by some big company. The conservative blogosphere is no more. A lot of the blogs either went out of business or have been bought by big entities. So Hot Air, Twitchy, a few of Michelle Malkin's properties were sold to Town Hall, which was bought, I think it was by Salem Media. And I'm not criticizing these companies, but there's if I were to send out things to my old email list, a lot of those people now work for big media, and so they're not going to help us out. So we've become independent. I didn't give you a lot of history on the website, but for 2 years it was just me. It was me alone. And we're getting 1 million hits a year with just me. And then for the 3rd year, it was me and a Cornell undergrad student I met because I'm the advisor to the Cornell Republicans. I'm the advisor to every Writer Center campus group. I was just contacted by Students for Life, which is forming a chapter in Cornell. So, it's no joke. If you're Writer Center, chances are I'm going to be your faculty advisor. And we decided that going as 501c3 would give us the independence, hopefully, get a lot of small donations, and that's fine. I hope that'll be a model moving forward that people can follow.
Hello. I'm actually a professor as well. I teach government for Lone Star, so some of my kids are here today. And so my question to you is, I encourage my students, we do articles over whatever topic that we're discussing right now. We're doing the death penalty. But I always encourage my students to speak up. But I notice that a lot of my students don't know how to speak up. Because in my classroom, there is no safe space. You want to have a safe space, then you go to kindergarten. You don't do it in my class. Because everybody has a right to say what they want to say if they're willing to back it up. And so do you think that we no longer teach our kids how to stand up correctly, not go cuckoo, not, try to hurt somebody, but just using their voice to say, this is wrong or this is right?
I've made this point, and I've been quoted in the Cornell Sun, which is the student newspaper, about this, is that there's a relatively small conservative community at Cornell, but it's pretty active, and that those students are much better prepared for the real world than their liberal counterparts, because every single day they have to defend their positions. Whereas if you're a liberal student on campus, everybody agrees with you except for a small minority of students. And so I think students need to be taught how to speak up, how to defend their positions. What I have found, and I just know, again, this is anecdotal, but a lot of the students, it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis for them. If they get up and they state a position, they are very, very fearful of having a name put on it, having a term put on it, being called racist or homophobic or misogynistic or whatever, even though they're not, okay? But it's just a policy difference. And so I think a lot of students tell me it's just not worth it to them. And so if you're encouraging your students to do that, I think that's a really good thing. I wish more people would do that. And I think, this new Texas law, we'll have to see how it works out. But if it opens up the debate, because what we've always said is we don't need our opinion to be dominant. We are willing to defend it on its merits, and people either agree with us or not, but just don't restrict it. Okay? And that's why we object to what Twitter does and what Facebook does, because they don't do that evenly, and that's why we object to these free speech circles and free speech locations, because the whole campus should be a free speech zone. But I agree with you, and I don't know how you remedy it. That's the problem. I think individual professors need to be willing to speak up and allow students that opportunity.
And I do, because I want them to formulate an opinion. Why do you back what you do? Like in the death penalty, some of my kids don't believe in it, and that's fine. Tell me why you don't, and then they fill in the blanks. But you've got to tell me why you don't agree or why you do agree with it. And I give them my point of view, and I tell them always, mine is mine and yours is yours. I'm not going to change how you think. I just want you to open your mind to every possibility before you shut it down. But in my class, they know how I roll. I don't censor anything. It's like, I come from a long line of cops, and we don't speak church talk, let's put it that way, especially when it comes to government. But I'm always encouraging my kids, why? And then some of them will stare at me, and I'll say, well, my answer's not on my forehead. You need to figure out as to what you believe in, because those beliefs are going to lead to who you're going to want in office. And it's, it's kind of sad that I had to bribe my kids, to sign up for voting, and if you didn't vote, you got extra credit. But it's something is better than nothing. So that's how I look at it.
So as conservatives, we have a natural tendency to try to find free market solutions to these problems, but it seems like every free speech alternative, the financial institutions backed out, or you're not allowed to have the map when you get most of your traffic. Do you think that we should keep the faith on the market approach, or we should go for litigation, trying to do the platform versus publisher debate, or maybe we go with what Senator Hawley is proposing, the sort of internet bill of rights? Which approach do you think is the best for conservatives to take?
Well, I still believe in a free market approach. There's a role for government. There's certain things only government can do, but the history of government meddling in the private sector is not great. And so my concern would be they institute rules and there can be unintended consequences. And now it's government regulation. It's not just a private entity. So I think public pressure, I think there's nothing wrong with politicians speaking up about the issue, and they're our representatives. But I would want to think very, very carefully, certainly before I want anybody in Congress writing anything on this. And even at the state level, I think you have to be really, really cautious. So I would not rule out some sort of government intervention for the purpose of maintaining the free market. I mean, I think of it the way I think of securities regulations, which is the topic I teach, which is, we're against, as a general matter, government regulation for the sake of regulation. On the other hand, if the regulation is to keep an open and functioning market, then that's a different story. So I would just be very hesitant to have the government get involved.
Kind of picking up on his point, my understanding is these entities have immunity, because they're open platforms. But yet, they're not open platforms. Is my understanding wrong, or how does that work?
That's a little bit out of my expertise, so I can only give you my general understanding. My understanding is that they have certain protections under the law from defamation lawsuits if they are a neutral platform. But once they start having a hand in what is done and saying, then they may lose that legal protection. I think that's the issue. Now, I don't know all the nuances of it, but a lot of people have spoken about stripping away those protections for entities that are, in a sense, putting their thumb on the scale.
I think when people look at the current political climate, let's just say impeachment, I think that we're in a political struggle for the primacy of the Democrats versus Republicans. I think, in fact, we're in a cultural struggle that's beyond politics at this point. And you've pointed to lack of civics for children. You've highlighted in particular the free speech element of the college campus. But I think in the struggle for republicanism and for conservatism in the long run, it's about retaking the colleges from a cultural perspective, eliminating the other problems in addition to the free speech, such as indoctrination, the struggles that students face, both in the classroom from a peer perspective and from a teacher perspective. And what I think the solution is, in the 20 some odd states where there are Republican governors, there has to be a rebalancing of the public institutions. You cited sort of the Cornell profile of the fact that everything is skewed liberal, from the professors to the student body and otherwise. I think that's true in the public universities as well. I think we're being betrayed by leadership in places like Austin, in a red state, where they fail to use their oversight of the public universities to bring that balance, which will then save us as a union. Thank you.
I mean, I think a lot of this is cultural and campus culture. It didn't happen overnight. It was at least one generation, maybe two generations in the making. And it's a tough thing because in academia, they value their academic freedom, and you're not going to be able to tell a professor what to teach in the classroom. On the other hand, you can try to create a diversity of viewpoint among the faculty, which is non-existent. I mean, Cornell Sun did a study 2 or 3 years ago and found that I think it was 96 or 97% of the political donations from faculty went to Democrats. And I think that's understating it. So I think that you can get people to bring balance, but you can't tell professors what to teach.
A quick commercial interruption here. Speaking of small donations, the restaurant charges us $100 for the room. I'm going to pass around our bucket if you'd like to make a contribution to help with that. We'd appreciate it.
And if you don't mind my public service announcement, I think I'm better off just shouting. There's a child in Texas I think he's 4 years old, who was removed from his family. They had taken him to a doctor to get a second opinion or for an evaluation. It's not working that well. Is it better?
Yes.
All right. They sought out a doctor's opinion on their son who has special needs. Somehow or another, after that one, having them consult, CPS was brought in, they removed the child. It went to court. In that court, it turned out the doctor never called in CPS, never thought it was an emergency, never thought the child should be removed because all they wanted to do was get a second opinion. But the caseworker removed the child. When it went to court, the judge agreed and actually told CPS, in spite of everyone's reports that it was done wrong, they didn't follow policy or procedure, the judge gave them permission to keep the child out of the home for up to a year. That was 3 months ago. It's here in Texas. So right now, the homeschool league that we have here in Texas is collecting money to help pay for the court costs to represent this family. After we take out $100, any money donated is going to be given to the Homeschool Association to help fund his court case to get that child back home. If you want to look it up, it's called bringdrakehome.com. You can find out all about it. Thank you for our service announcements. Oh, that's mine.
Over here, Robin.
Oh, hot topic. Could you
Here, wait.
talk-
Oh, I didn't know we had people down there.
Talk about Oakland a little bit.
Oberlin. So I've been covering Oberlin. We used to have another website called College Insurrection.
Right.
And we ended up rolling it back into Legal Insurrection because it became very hard to develop an independent audience. Basically, the same readers were reading both. So why have them go to two different places? So we rolled the content in. So I started following Oberlin many, many years ago because it's just one of those colleges where things always seem to happen. And so there was, the first big thing I followed at Oberlin was what I call the Great Racism Hoax of 2013. There were legitimately racist and nasty swastikas and things like that plastered all around campus. Campus canceled classes, did all those things. Well, it turns out that it was a hoax in the sense that it was done by a liberal student to start a conversation on campus. Okay, and that was exposed initially by the Daily Caller, who got the police reports, then we joined in also. Despite that, the administration acted like it wasn't a hoax. I mean, it wasn't a hoax in the sense, these were actually plastered around campus, but it wasn't done by somebody for racist purposes. It was done to spark a conversation. So I started following Oberlin. They had a professor there, we covered this also, who was crazy anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist posting stuff on Facebook. She ended up getting fired for other things. They had protests against Christina Hoff Sommers, she calls herself the factual feminist, talking about her great tweet, one of the great tweets of all time, says, I'm trying to think of the exact wording, if you want to eliminate the wage gap, switch your major from feminist dance theory to electrical engineering. So she's a feminist, but she's a factual feminist. She gets protested there. So we've covered all this stuff at Oberlin. So when the Gibson's Bakery was protested, what happened is Gibson's Bakery been in existence for 130 years, 5th generation in the family, supporting 3 generations currently, plus almost a dozen local employees. They stop a black Oberlin student, male student, for shoplifting. He's got wine tucked in his thing. Gets in a scuffle. 2 black female Oberlin students join in the scuffle, and all 3 students get arrested. Rather than waiting for the facts to come out, which is they were actually shoplifting, okay, the university came down, the college came down on this little bakery may have had something to do with the fact that the shoplifting arrest took place the day after Election Day 2016. So the campus was already in meltdown because of the Trump victory. And then this was like the spark. And they had protests, and they had the college stopped doing business with the bakery. The community boycotted them, but what gave rise to the lawsuit was that the bakery was accused of not only being racist, but having a long history of racial profiling. And witnesses testified in court that the dean of students was in front of the bakery with stacks of flyers making these accusations, giving the stacks to students who were passing them out. And that was the basis for the defamation lawsuit against the college. And so I started to cover this right when it happened. It's like, here Oberlin goes again, another Oberlin crazy thing. I never knew what we developed. And we continued to cover it as it percolated along. Then when they filed the lawsuit, then as it moved through the courts, and the Oberlin strategy was, college strategy was very demeaning towards the bakery, very aggressive. And so when it came time for trial, we hired somebody. It was our first big project as a foundation to attend the trial and report every single day for the 2 to 3 week trial, which turned into a 7-week trial. So, ka-ching, ka-ching, we're paying for someone to sit there and report every night. And it's never ending. This thing's never going away. But because of that, we were the only one following it. And as it's going along, we're saying to people, you know, this could be a really big thing. The evidence that's coming in is really, really bad. What the administrators were saying about the bakery, their whole attitude was tone deaf. So when the $11 million compensatory verdict came in, everybody looked to us because we were the only one who'd been reporting every single day. And then when the $33 million punitive verdict came in, and so that was a big project of ours where we saw something coming, and look, it could have been nothing. It could have been money down the drain. If Oberlin won it, nobody would have cared. Or if it had been a $500,000 verdict, wouldn't have gotten the attention. And that's the sort of thing we're trying to do more of, is invest in those sort of projects. And so Oberlin now on a public relations campaign, because they get so much bad publicity out of this, saying that they are essentially the victim here. That their First Amendment rights have been, and the rights of students have been violated, and that they are being held liable for student speech. And that's dangerous to free speech on campuses, because if a university is going to be held liable for what students say, then administrators are going to clamp down on student speech.
They got in trouble for what they said.
That's right, but it's a complete fabrication, okay? They weren't held liable for student speech. They were held liable because their dean of students, a senior vice president of the entity, was out in front of the bakery handing out flyers that were defamatory. That's why they were held liable. And they were held liable for a couple of other things, interference with business, things like that. But they were held liable for like any other business. If you have a business and your employee in the course of employment commits a tort, you could be held liable. And that's what happened to Oberlin College. Now they're on appeal. I'm not saying they're going to lose the appeal. Anything's possible. Okay? They've identified 100 things they claim the judge did wrong. Maybe the appeals court will grab onto one of those things and say it was material and substantial and it affected the outcome. Or maybe they'll say, you know what, in a 7-week trial, you could try to nitpick every single thing a judge does, and if you do that, you'll never have a verdict that holds up, because nobody's perfect. So I don't know what's going to happen to the appeal. I can't rule out that the college will be successful.
As it's generally well known, most students on a college campus tend to lean a little liberal. As Bill Will said, Ike hasn't had a chance to knock the stupid out of me yet. you said you are the kind of the sponsoring staff member on the university for any student organization that's right-leaning. As a parent whose kids will eventually have to go to one of these institutions and learn something, I hope, can you describe the kind of student who starts a conservative club on campus, and what led them to already harbor these conservative ideas that are so rare?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I am very impressed with I won't even say conservative, the non-liberal students on campus. Because it takes a lot of courage in their social peer group to come out like that. I call it coming out as conservative on campus. It's a big step. You risk social ostracization, you risk, other sorts of things. And I think a lot of it is, how they were brought up. And I have a lot of parents who come to me after speeches, and they say, like, I don't even recognize my kids anymore. Like, I sent them off to the school, and they came home and said, well, where have you been for 15 years? Okay? You sent them, and I'm in favor of public schools, but you sent them to a public school where you didn't get involved, you don't know what they're being taught. And yeah, after 12 years of that, they're liberal. And so I think the ones are the ones whose have had strong parental involvement in their education. Maybe they attended schools that were, maybe Catholic schools or religious schools, or for whatever the reason, their parents were involved. And I think that's the one thing I see more than anything, is parental involvement makes all of the difference in getting the kids involved in a community.
We happen to have someone here who was a leader at the University of Texas, Young Conservatives, Anthony. Anthony been in the news a few times for fighting back and being physically assaulted and standing up to the liberals. And he's also running for Houston City Council in the upcoming election at large 5. You can't miss his name, Anthony Del Pacino. Right, one more question?
Did you ever consider doing an investigative reporting like Enlightened, when they went into the, let's say, Planned Pyramid, and they got on tape someone that actually said what they were doing, something that was really up front in your face that was...
Yeah, we are not currently equipped to do that sort of undercover work. It takes a certain infrastructure, a certain staffing, certain technical ability that we don't have. We might in the future, but that's not in our budget, so to speak, for now. But we can send somebody, man on the street things, publicly confronting people, publicly questioning them, that sort of thing. But in terms of the hidden camera sort of thing, we're just not equipped to do that right now.
One last. Stand up loud.
Have you noticed a distinction between law schools and regular undergraduate schools as far as campus culture goes?
I've not noticed any significant difference. There are some, I think law schools are very similar. I think we've spoken in generalizations. It does vary from campus to campus, and it does vary from college to college. And I will say to its credit, Cornell, relative to its peers, everything's relative, is moderate compared to Columbia and Yale and Harvard and other Ivy League schools. It really is a relatively moderate place.
Only 97%.
Only 97%, that's right. But that's political donations. It's an indicator, but it's not an exact measure. But I think it varies. Before you send your kids someplace, investigate the campus culture and investigate whether there is a conservative student infrastructure. Right? If somebody at Cornell wants to participate in conservative life, there are enough students and enough groups to do that. They're not the majority of the campus, but there are enough. then you can feel supported and have a peer group, whereas in other places that may not be the case. So I'd say do investigation, and just don't hand your kid over to somebody else. Just one last anecdote, because I know we have to go. So the only time I was political until 2008 was in law school in the early 1980s. So I went to Harvard Law School, and at that time, the issue at the law school was the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. And it wasn't as big as it is now, but so, the Jewish students group that I was part of, and then there was a coalition of other groups on the other side. And if you look at the leadership from our side, everybody went into private industry. They went into industry, they went into law firms. On the other side, they all went into academia. Literally. I don't have time to get into it now, but the doctrine of intersectionality was invented by my classmate, who was one of those students on the other side of the issue, and went on to become a law professor, first at UCLA and now Columbia. So whether it was by plan or just the way it happened, a generation has, infiltrated the universities. Again, maybe it's a plan, maybe it just happened that way. It attracts a certain type of person. But they all went into academia. We all went into private industry. We may have done better financially, but they had access to our kids for 30 years. And politically, they did better. So, anyway, I thank you for having me.